Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. We're so glad you're joining us on this episode, and I'm so excited to interview Heiwa no Bushi.
Pleasure to be here.
Welcome to Spirituality Adventures.
Thank you, my friend.
I started this out, because I just wanted to interview people from all walks of life about everything that they love, but I always like to include, spirituality.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the spirituality part of the conversation is just a minor part of it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's almost like the whole thing. But I would say your journey has been a spiritual adventure your whole life.
Yeah, my whole life. Yeah.
Just as I've, gotten to know you a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give, just for those who are tuning in, we'll get to this. But Bushi grew up in the Black Baptist tradition.
Yeah.
He has been in military. The Marine. He is a black belt. He is in the martial arts. He is also now a Buddhist teacher.
Yeah.
And so his journey has been one of a spiritual adventure, I would say. Right?
Indeed.
And it's still going. So excited to unpack some of your story with our audience, and thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So let's start, where you were born, and kind of give us a little feel for your growing up years, and how that led to your early sense of calling into like pastoral ministry.
Yeah. So I was born in West Palm Beach, Florida. My mother and father were very interesting people. They were very church going. My grandmother was a minister, and she was the one who actually encouraged me into ministry. And I often tell this story about how that came about. My grandmother, being a black woman in the Black Baptist Church, was relegated to the status of you're not quite a minister, even though she was doing ministry and wanted credentials to preach and whatnot. Many of the men folk didn't want that to materialize. And my grandmother decided when I was about 6 years old that she would somehow or another get these men to give her an opportunity. And so what she started doing was she started teaching me at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up until I was able to stand on the carpeting, not on the footstool up in the pulpit.
That pulpit is sacred space.
It's sacred space, and it's interesting that a little 6-year-old black boy could get up there, but my grandmother couldn't. She was, she was told if you go.
We were doing a joint service with the largest African-American church in Kansas City, is a Baptist church. And one of my female pastors just walked right up behind the pulpit, started speaking, and they were like, whoa, lightning's going to.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you destroy the whole temple doing that stuff.
Yeah, so you could do it, but she couldn't.
Yeah, and
most of my white audience doesn't understand that right. The black church, that the pulpit is reserved for the anointed ones.
Yeah, that's holy ground. Holy ground.
And some of the black tradition doesn't allow women behind that pulpit.
That's right. Still to this day.
Yeah.
There are many women, great preachers, great teachers, great evangelists who have never within the structured institutional Baptist church set foot in the pulpit. Now they can preach like my grandmother all day long from down there where the lady reads the notes and the birthdays.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So that was my beginning. My grandmother decided that she was going to teach me how to read her bio. And, this was allowed. Okay, put the little boy up there. He can read your few credentials and whatnot. And then she would speak from the floor. Well, she taught me how to enunciate and pronunciate and taught me some big words. And I was able to say them very well. And what happened was she would dress me up on those Sundays that she would preach, and I'd have on a nice suit and a bow tie or a necktie. And I would really give it all I had to make her sound good. And so people started coming more and more on the Sundays that she was preaching just to hear this little boy. And eventually, what happened after several years, she was granted, ordination, and she was given the right to preach. And it didn't stop me from introducing her. So I developed a great deal of my ministry understanding, my ability to public speak. And I'm quite the introvert, mind you, to public speak from those experiences early on by way of my grandmother. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so interesting. Mm-hmm. So at some point, though, you decided, because you got a master. Did you get a?
Yeah, I've got two masters, and my PhD is in systematic theology. Yes.
Wow. Where did you do your education at?
New Hope Bible College, which is a institution here in the state of North Carolina, very well known Southern Baptist Bible College. And I also attended Brighton University, which was stationed in Hawaii at the time. They later moved to Missouri. It is a defunct school now, and they lost their accreditation and other things. But I was able to secure a master's of sacred theology there, and also my PhD in systematic theology before they closed.
Okay. Yeah. So, and were you pastoring?
I was.
While you were going through doing your education?
I was. It was the basis for learning and exploration. I worked out a great deal of my intellectual theories about theology and religion and things of that sort while pastoring. And it was early on in life, however, I think I may have been maybe 13 or 14, that something didn't quite add up. I watched my grandmother, who was a ridiculously gifted preacher, from the pulpit, and she had all of the ecumen and the ethos of a preacher in the church. But at home, she was an entirely different person. She used language, and she drank a little bit, and she chewed snuff. And so
grandma.
Yeah, right. So
grandma.
Right. And I think because I was developing at a young age and I was really getting into what I was doing, people were responding. And so this gave me a sense of, this is the right thing to do. I'm on the right path. I started really, really getting into the phase of I believe. But what was somewhat of a detour sign was the way that my parents lived. They were human when they were home, and then they were holy when they were at church. And so to children, sometimes that's a conflict. It was for me. I often say now that we're all victims of the post-traumatic stress disorder of our parents. And so, early on, I developed this understanding that there's something not quite right about the religious experience and the human experience.
Yeah. I know when I started my church, I tried to build a church that I would have called it down to earth spirituality, but where we didn't play that game of, you put your Sunday best on, your Sunday smile on, you could have just had a massive blowout argument on the way to church, but then you walk in the doors and everything's great. You got
angels following you in the door. Yeah.
You got your Jesus praise on, and everything's
Absolutely.
All of our traditions, church traditions have that. And it kind of makes us want to wear masks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is where, for me, there was a great deal of psychological imbalance. There's one of the things I often say today is that the church and religious people are some of the most psychologically conflicted persons or people on the planet. We're taught to be very moral, and then we see, well, how is that looking with regards to religion across the globe today? You see, this kind of imbalance in what is moral and what is right and what is good and what is human and acceptable. Those things that we do. So
you're pastoring. You're working through. You're doing deep study and theology. And at the same time, as a 13, 14-year-old, you already were experiencing some conflict over your own tradition.
Yeah, I did. And it just grew up. The older I got, the more I realized, of course, there's several levels of understanding as you matriculate through the ages. And I came to realize as a pastor that, this is pretty fucked. To be very, very frank, we're teaching people to honor God, yet they are so denying of themselves. And this is, often I would say things like, I know we love God and I know we love the idea of getting to heaven, but we are killing ourselves with diabetes and this irrational eating and this irrational behavior that's causing us to be locked up or to be killed or to be impoverished. And so, there was a great divide in, the true koinonia of my mind, the idea that we are holy and human seem to be in two different rooms. They never seem to agree, or were they acceptable to the institution of the church? You see?
Yeah, I hear you. What I've gone through the last few years in my own journey, one of the things I had to come to grips with was the shame-based sexual ethic that I had really bought into as a young child growing up in the Southern Baptist tradition. And then as a pastor trying to be a role model, I think really carried some of that. I always tried to be grace-based, always knew that, all of us have fallen short and there's grace for us. But I think even that statement sometimes still allowed me to feel shame about where I didn't live up. And sometimes where I didn't live up it was really just human.
Right.
It was just my embodied humanity, my embodied sexuality. And I didn't have a way of actually embracing that. And so then that led to problems.
Yeah, absolutely. As it does for all of us, whether or not we want to admit that, there is a psychological imbalance within many, human beings who are religious, who are Christian, who are Baptist, Methodist. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, right.
There is a psychological impurity because we don't include the human side of whom we are. And that's not to say that our humanity is off the gate, bad. The idea of original sin is one that I have always shunned. It's impossible for me to believe that God is so wonderful that he did all of these wonderful things, or she did all of these wonderful things, and forgot to clean us up before giving us this grace. So we're starting out kind of sideways if original sin is, so there is, for me, if there is no confidence that the flesh, the human side of us is prone to error. There's no, confidence in that. And I think that's really what it takes, confidence in the fact that, yeah, you're human. You're going to make these mistakes because this is the structure that you've been handed. Before we got here, somebody gave us our name. Somebody told us what we were going to believe, told us who were the good people, who were the bad people, and then they enforced that. And we just followed that out, denying ourselves and going with other people's notions and whatnot. And, so this is what causes the imbalance. We have training wheels on our humanity, but we have a Cadillac to chauffeur guard around in, And that's.
I read a book, just in the last couple of years by a guy named, I think, Matthew Fox, called Original Blessing. Original Blessing, yes. Yeah. And and it was beautifully written book. And I don't think he's a Franciscan like Richard Rohr, but he is in a Catholic tradition. But just like how many times people start at the third chapter of Genesis instead of the first in terms of, right. Blessing is, those are the first words out of the gate, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
If you're in the Judeo-Christian flow of things, right?
Right.
But,
absolutely.
But at any rate, so you're studying, you're pastoring, you've got all this conflict going on, you're thinking through it all, and then you wind up in the military.
Yeah.
Did you let go of all of that?
No.
Give us that. Like, how do you wind up from pastoring and PhDs in theology to military and and dojo?
I have always been one of those people. I would happen to say I overcompensated for my not being able to rationally understand God. And so the military was, I'm somewhat of an adrenaline freak. I think we've kind of pretty much determined that. I'm somewhat of an adrenaline freak and quite just a natural adventurer. I wanted to serve this country. It was an American ideal that was sold to me as a child, and I felt like I needed to contribute to that. I live here. I have neighbors whom I love dearly, friends, family that I love dearly. And I felt it necessary to serve in the military and do my part to keep us safe. I did that also while being in ministry. So when I wasn't doing, running off and training or going on deployments, when I wasn't doing that, I was back home doing ministry and studying and things of that sort. So, and then, martial arts was something that I started out with when I think I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. Mom was like, you're not just going to stay in the house on Saturday and do nothing and eat up all the food. They had programs down at the local gym and the rec center, and martial arts was one of them. And so I began a journey there. So, it's just,
Yeah. So tell me, how long were you in the military?
Well, my first enlistment, I was in for 4 years, and then I went back for an additional 5 years, and then got out due to a knee injury. And, it was time to call it quits then. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I did enjoy my time, other than, having seen combat. I saw Iraq, and that was a conflict that kind of changed my mind about how important it is to work on being a better person, back in the rear, as we would call it, being a good person at home. And to help other people to develop understanding and love and compassion before it came to beans and bullets. So, yeah.
Yeah. So with all your education, did you go in as an officer?
No, I was enlisted.
You enlisted? Okay.
I was enlisted. I didn't earn my degrees until after I had already been in.
Okay.
And then, Marine Corps OCS is quite selective. And, even with my studies and my field of expertise as it was developing, I was probably suited for nothing more than maybe a chaplain. But and that was not what I wanted. Right. I wanted the ammunition. I wanted the gear. I wanted to be on the front lines, test the physical dexterity of my body and my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So at some point you began to you began to study Buddhism.
Yes.
How did that happen? How did you shift from this long history of Christianity, education, theology, pastoring?
Yeah. And after my tour of Iraq, I was there in 90 and 91 during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I was a part of the first movement that actually went over into the oil fields and fighting with the Republican Guard. I wanted to do something else when I returned. I said, I want to do something to help people, so it didn't get this bad in the world ever again. So that was where a great deal of my concern with ministry, my concern with community development, my concern with psychology, even. Really ramped up. When we were fighting over in Iraq, there were many people who were like, my age. And they were saying things like, I wish that I could go, I wish that I could go and fight. And having had some experiences, I said to myself, that they have the wrong idea of what this is about. And also what it does to you to have to harm other people. They really don't have an understanding of that. So, yeah. So
was it in the military where you were introduced to the different religions? And then what drew you to Buddhism?
Yeah, I was stationed in Japan, Okinawa, Japan. And there are lots of temples there. Buddhism and Shintoism are the main religions there. And so meditation became something I became quite interested in, hearing that it calms the mind. It is a deeper way of understanding the human self. It is about compassion, which was contrary to what, it would appear that I was doing as a Marine fighting. It was really about compassion and being soft and understanding and things of that sort. So Buddhism really grew on to me. And after I had, I would say ascertained some measure of knowledge regarding the practice of meditation, I furthered my studies there. I continued to read and take on teachers and gurus when I had left the islands to continue to study. I came back to the United States and continue to do so. And I still study a great deal today. And at some point studying Buddhism, I came to realize, especially having had a Christian background, wow, this sounds so reminiscent of, someone else that I've heard talking this way. And it was Jesus. I really started looking into the parallels of Buddhism and Christianity. I was growing very fond of Buddhism. And at one point, I really wanted to express that, but you can't do that in the Baptist church.
Right.
I really wanted to share, I think that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, is saying the same thing that Jesus is saying. So, for many years, I didn't, come forward and say that, I am a Buddhist. But what I did was I started integrating the teachings. Sometimes from the pulpit, I would teach from, the Buddhist teachings and, kind of say things like, and who else says that? Jesus. And then I would carry on, because you can't stick with Buddha. You got to come back to Jesus. And then people really started to get it. And after about, like now I've been a monk this is my 12th year. So 12 years later, after starting that practice of integrating Buddhism and meditation into Christian theology, many people across the globe recognize the work that I do, which is called Bodhi Christo, as, this is a pretty valid viewpoint. It is supported largely by Christians who are in Tibet, Tibetan Christians, they're very prevalent there. And so they recognize, the parallels. And so, this is largely what I do now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was a religion major at Baylor, religion and business. We studied mostly Christian history, but we also studied some of the other faith traditions as well. But then I did a Master of Divinity, and then I did a Doctor of Ministry at Fuller.
Okay.
And I was working on a second doctorate, a PhD in the Hebrew Bible. And I was down to the dissertation, but ended up going to rehab instead. So then since then, my own personal journey, I was so, and my story went really public, and it was really humiliating. And I really went into a pretty dark space in 2019, felt like an atheist, probably didn't really want to live. And then somebody mailed me a copy of Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward.
Yeah.
And it really took I would say it got my faith off the ventilator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started kind of devouring Richard's books. And the other thing was, while I was in rehab, I was introduced to a Buddhist style of meditation, which some people just call mindfulness meditation.
Mindfulness, yes.
And then I've been in a meditation group for over a year now.
Okay.
And the lady that I actually have done an interview with her, the lady that I've been in a meditation group with, studied with Tara Brock.
Yeah, Tara Brock. Yes, Jack Cornfield.
And I've felt, I've just really valued what I've learned through her. And I actually applied for their 2-year training.
Okay.
So I would still say I'm a Jesus follower, but even before, when I would teach on, I'd always every now and then do a series on all the faith traditions just to help people. And I'd always say that we're always supposed to love and respect everybody. As I studied all the different religions, I didn't see them all as exactly the same, but sometimes answering different questions in different ways, sometimes answering the same questions in the same way, and sometimes answering the same questions in a little bit different ways.
Sure. That's right.
a mix of all of that.
Right.
But always felt like there were things I could learn from all the different traditions. And certainly I'm really trying to grow and learn in Buddhism. So for the audience, we met just last month at the Wild Goose
Festival. That's right.
In North Carolina. And you were doing a talk on the Dharma.
The Dharma of Jesus, the Dharma of Christ.
Of Christ. Right. Yeah. And I went to it, and I bumped into you a couple of times. And so I just got really intrigued. And then Brian McLaren, who's I interviewed him here, and we've become I think become friends in the last 6 months or so. He's the one that encouraged me to go to Wild Goose Festival.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. So you run the Thomasville Buddhist Center.
Yes. And it is, it's in Thomasville, and it's been in existence since 2011.
Okay. And I noticed it, and I don't know how to pronounce these words, but maybe you can just give us a little description of each of these, because most of my audience is going to be from a Christian background, but actually I've got people from all over, because I've been in the recovery world for about 3 years. And so I've got people that listen and follow in the recovery world, the deconstruction world, and other traditions as well.
Right.
So, so you said you studied Mahayan, or I don't even know how to say these words.
Mahayana.
Yeah. And Daishin
Zen. Yeah.
Daishin Zen. And then you kind of like, is it Jainism?
Jainism is a religion in and of itself. But I'm very fond of Jainism. Simply
you might give us a little, tell us what Jainism is, and then tell us what these two types of Zen Buddhist are, and maybe how, because I've been introduced to I know the Tara Brach, they do they're a certain type of
insight and Vipassana Buddhism.
Yeah. So I don't even understand the difference with all these things, right?
Well, and one of the reasons I study so abroad is because, it's kind of like a well-balanced diet. If your body is, treated with the necessary essentials for each and every organ, each and every facet of you, you get all of those things to nutritionally supplement yourself to survive.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I study so many other religions and have grown very fond of the supplements of Mahayana Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, and also Jainism, is, because it provides a greater insight into the human nature itself. It is so Jainism itself. One of the things I really, really love about Jainism is the religion itself is insistent on not giving God a name or naming God in any particular way. This is, very often I'm often quoted as saying, if you define it, you'll have to defend it. And that's an automatic response. For instance, when we got here, somebody gave me my name. My parents gave me my name. And if somebody said my name wrong, then the first thing that I would do is correct them, you see. And Jainism is not particularly big about holding to the definitions of God, not even the name, not even the attributes itself, which means that God can be a bit more fluid in our experience and in our awareness,
maybe a little bit more like process.
Sure. Like process theology, So, I said something just yesterday, and it was quoted, if I take my hand and I shield the sun, I really can't see the sun. I can feel it. I know to a certain degree that it is there, but I'm not experiencing or seeing the sun. Likewise, if I hold any image of God or definition of God, then I truly can't experience God either. And so Jainism is, to me and to many others, kind of like the platform of letting go of those things that keep us down, you see. And then Mahayana Buddhism is...
I'll interject.
Go right ahead.
Way back with Moses, right?
Right.
And he's like going, like in the ancient Near East, if you could name or even name your God, in some ways it gave you a little bit of a opportunity to control.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then when Moses is going, well, who shall I say sent me, and like, what's your name?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I am that I am.
I am that I am. Exactly. And this is,
that's a little mystery and unknowing right there, right?
Yeah. And that's a great deal of Jainism.
That's just what it made me think of, is all. Yeah.
Right. So even in that respect, I think God is a bit more intelligent than we've been behaving. Don't get stuck in labels. But Mahayana Buddhism is a school of Buddhism. There's Vajrayana Buddhism, there's Mahayana Buddhism, there's Theravadan Buddhism. Those are the three major schools of Buddhism. And all Buddhism is Buddhism, but they come from three different perspectives. Mahayana is considered the playful expression, the more progressive expression of Buddhism. It is based largely on experience, as opposed to like Theravadan Buddhists. They're usually denoted by the orange robes, and they're largely Asian, and they don't eat meat, and they don't run, they don't dance. There's certain particulars to the rules of being a Vajrayana Buddhist that they prescribe to. Mahayana is more expansive. It's really about the experiences itself. This particular school of Buddhism really fascinated me and really stuck to me very well because I am an American. I recognize my experiences with religion, my experiences in culture, my experiences as an African American originating from the South who just so happens to be operating in the world as a cosmopolite, this person who can go and speak to all people and, somewhat of a world teacher, so to speak. Mahayana gave me the tools to broaden my experiences. In other words, in order to teach people, I had to know their experiences. And being a Theravadan Buddhist would not allow that, though they're largely relegated to the temple. They live a temple life. But many Vajrayana Buddhists, such as Tara Brach, comes out of the school of Mahayana Vipassana. Okay. They're more expansive. They experience the very nature of living. And so this is the particular reason that I chose and still, hold that tradition dear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. For the audience, like for me, so, I mean, I'd studied Buddhism enough to know some of the basics, right?
Right.
The Noble Truths.
Mm-hmm. Four Noble Truths, right? Eightfold Path.
The Eightfold Path, and, understand a little bit of its history and where it came from and how it developed. Mm-hmm. I even read like Ken Wilber's book, Religion of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
That was a big bite,
Right.
Like the book is super thick.
Yeah.
And he goes through some of his views of the history of Buddhism in the beginning of that book, the four turnings, he calls it.
Right.
Some of the history. I'm reading another book on the history of the Himalaya, which he's diving into, how Tibet became Tibetan Buddhism, but the history behind that whole area of the world. Mm-hmm.
The Tibetans at one point were very savage, very, very unskilled, very savage people until Buddhism was introduced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but like for people who are listening, like the meditation for me originally was like I was experiencing loss and grief and trauma. And some of the things that led me into that were my own. I probably have always had general anxiety. I was wrestling with insomnia. I had an overactive brain. I could never turn the thing off. And so the mindfulness meditation, what drew me to that was it seemed that I would find space to help calm all of that. And the science, it seems like, behind mindfulness meditation is really strong.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it was some of that drew me initially, just like my own health.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And then I'm such a reader, studier, thinker that well, then then I'm going to start diving into all of it. Right. But,
right.
and I'm just on the front end of that.
Yeah.
But, so it's helpful for me to hear, your journey. And I see, so this Mahayana.
Yeah. Mahayana really spoke to me. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And it's a bit more expansive. You didn't have to confine yourself to the temple.
No, I was, what is considered a practicing Buddhist outside of the temple, even though I had received transmission and received ordination. I was still allowed to live a normal life, which is, in my opinion, which is probably one of the most productive routes to take if you're on the quest to really know yourself and to discover, just how expansive you can be. You see, you have to.
What's interesting to me is how many Christians that are going to churches whose churches maybe wouldn't encourage them to do Buddhist meditation or yoga.
Right.
So they got to sneak off.
Yeah.
To do the meditation or the yoga because they like it. It helps them.
Right. And there are countless across the Christian spectrum that are sneaking off.
Right. They don't come back and broadcast it.
Right.
Probably my problem is I'm talking about it on podcast now.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. But no, I just find it fascinating, and I love to learn, and and I've really benefited from the year and a half or so that I've had, sort of practicing what I have practiced, which I still see myself as a huge novice, right? This is like, I really want to meditate well, but I'm not sure that I do, It's
right. That's a good place to be. There's always room for practice.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. But I've really learned, one of the things that I've really tried to do from it, and you might bounce off of this, is, how as a Christian, if I had negative thoughts or negative emotions or lustful thoughts or, any kind of thought that I didn't think was, a good Christian thought or a good Christian emotion, I would try to fight it, battle it, subdue it, ignore it.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll go away.
Yeah.
And now after doing that for 40 years, and then I blew up anyway. Now I'm like going, okay, I want to be open. I want to be curious.
Yep.
What's going on with this emotion? What's going on with this thought? Where is it coming from? Let's be open and curious about it. Let's hear what it has to say.
Right.
I've never handled, that's never how I approached my own thoughts and emotions before. Does that make sense to you?
It makes complete sense. One of the titles that I've been given over the last 10 years is iconoclast. People recognize me as an iconoclast. An iconoclast is a person who particularly is on the mission of, shattering the religious institutions, its dogma, its doctrine, those things that hold humanity back. And to some degree, I greatly agree with that. Now, I'm not going to institute a crusade in order to do that against the church. But what I do is try to educate the church about the human factors of being a Christian. We often talk about Jesus, and we often talk about Jesus from the perspective of being the Son of God. What we fail very often to do very clearly is to talk about Jesus being the Son of Man. Those things, what did it take psychologically for Jesus to break ritual, break rule, break custom, to sit down next to that woman and talk to her, even after she admonished him, you shouldn't be doing this. What did it take psychologically? What barriers did he break in order to do that? Now, if we are to emulate God And if God is, the benefactor of the image that we bear, we are made in the image of God, then those are the psychological areas that we too must be willing to explore. If everything about our lives is structured according to code, code of religion, code of society, then we really are in exploring the other facet or the other aspect of being God or being Christ-like. And so, yes, I think that quite often our religious framework keeps us from being human. It's interesting that, as you know, in the 90s, we started seeing this major downfall of marriage across the board in Christianity. And when many of those people were, petitioned for a reason as to why, many of those people said that, well, I'm just not happy. I'm discovering that I'm changing and I no longer feel the same way in my body and in my mind. Many of those people would assert that I no longer see it the same way. When the body begins to fail, the mind too is also on the decline. And so some of the more vitriolic ways, the more vitriolic mannerisms, the more dominant attitudes that we have, those kind of biologically regress. And so, the human nature of us, we as human beings, really needs to be explored. And I think that religion in and of itself, and particularly Christianity, we're talking here, has relegated us to such a standard that for thousands of years has, is suggested to us that we circumnavigate the reality of our own existences and find the answers through faith and belief and hope. I think that is what is clearly a crippling effect to the human being. And I don't think that is what God wants. Certainly, God doesn't want to see the church in the condition that it's in. And how do we fix that? Do we come up with a new rule? Do we come up with a new leader? In order to fix that, we have to fix the people that bear those philosophies. And the only place to begin to reconstruct is to really, firstly, understand who's going to be carrying these beliefs. The human fabric of whom we are is the most important commodity that God saw fit to create, and Jesus saw fit to say when it began to be so structured. He said, I know what the law says, but I say otherwise. So I think that it is meditation. It is really getting to know, both the profane and the sacred of ourselves, that we find, a balance, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the things that having been, I've studied the Hebrew scriptures quite in depthly, almost to the point where I did a PhD there.
Right.
But then I'm a Jesus guy. And it's so fascinating to me Jesus was a Torah teacher, but he was a radical Torah teacher.
Oh, absolutely.
And he renewed, kept some of the old and, brought forth treasures old and new.
Old and new. That's right.
Out of that tradition. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in a certain sense, we're all called to do that. If I'm hearing you, we're all called to take what we've received,
right,
hold on to some of the old, but also renew it, transform, move it forward. And what I hear you saying is that one of the things about we have to embrace and embody, we have to embrace ourselves, our full humanity, and then have a fully embodied spirituality.
Yeah.
Not denying us, but receiving all that we are and allowing that to move us forward as we integrate old and new.
Absolutely. And my basis for that for that teaching even, and I teach that across the globe, I teach that constantly, is that we have lived, according to, there are three types of knowledge. There are only three. And the mystical is to be found in that also. But the first type of knowledge that all of us are given from the time that we are born is called explicit knowledge. And it is, in preparation for your PhD, your dissertation, there was some suggested readings. And so people say, this is the textbook. This will help you. When we're in grade school, they say this is the textbook, and you read the information, and then we're going to test you on it at the end of the chapter. And if you test well, then you'll receive an A, and that is the information that we carry for the rest of our lives. That is also the information that many of us are willing to go to war for. You see, this is this explicit knowledge. The second type of knowledge that all human beings are, endowed with, whether we want it or not, is called codified knowledge. And the root word there is code. It is the stop sign. It's the red light, it's the green light, it's the broken perforated line that says you can pass, and then it's that solid line that says you better not pass. There are codes, there are do's and don'ts that society has set up for us. But many of us, most of us on the planet, I would venture to say that just about 95 to 99% of us don't experience tacit knowledge, TACIT. This is the knowledge that can't be taught. It is experiencing the thing, whatever it is, for yourself. You determining in your own flesh, what does this feel like to you? How does this resonate with your mind? How does this resonate with your emotions? What are you getting from it? How is your mind structured? Many of us overlook the fact that the minds that we have are the minds of those who came before us. And we are a suggested continuance of those people. In many ways, we are beasts of burden of history. We continue to lug it around, and yet we don't experience ourselves. And tacit knowledge is what gives us that true credibility of being a human being. It's one of the reasons that I learned this early. It's one of the reasons that I have explored so much and adventured so much, because, if I just go with the knowledge that my grandmother gave me, or the church gave me, or my community gave me, then in many cases, I would easily be stereotyped, just like most of us, into a certain perspective by other people. Mm-hmm. And those perspectives, I would also be more inclined to defend, you see, because I've established that that's the definition. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, gosh, Bushi, I could go on forever with you on this stuff. Two things that are popping into my head. One is, like you're this sword-bearing warrior who's peaceful.
Yeah.
Explain that conundrum to me.
Yeah.
And then the other one is what might be your favorite space of where Jesus and your Buddhism come together? I'm sure there's a bunch of ways that you've presented that. Right. What's maybe your favorite way that those two have merged? So those are two different questions.
And what was your first one again?
The sword bearing.
Right. Okay.
Peaceful.
Yeah. So both of those questions actually merge onto the one answer that I'm about to give. So okay. I practice I practice a very very ancient practice, which is Hindu in nature, and it is every day. This is my practice. This is one of the reasons I don't, spend a great deal of time necessarily reading others, even though I'm very well read. I spend much more time in the practice of jnana marga. Jhana Marga, Gnanamarga. It's a Hindu practice, and the practice itself is about intellectual dissection. Intellectual dissection. And I think that this is what both Jesus and the Buddha were both staunch about. You know, we often wonder, where did Jesus go when he was 12, 13 years of age and then came back as this young strapping lad? Well, one of the things that I came to realize after, you know, studying Buddhism for many, many years is, my God, his responses are so dharmic. Understanding the history of Israel and the Torah, you know, the law, his responses to the teachings of the Hebrew people, you know, of the Israelites, I should say, was quite intellectual. You know, he stumped people in their tracks. You know, the first thing that went to operation when Jesus spoke was their minds. And the Buddha did the same thing. This practice of Jhana Marga is about not holding to the concept, but really experiencing what happens in the process. So much like process theology, seeing a thing as it is, not giving a name to it, not giving a definition, not even giving credit to the experience, but fully experiencing this thing helps you to develop this sense of understanding the movement of a thing from the most minute to the largest aspects of it. This practice of being intellectually astute, you know, so to speak. If there is a relationship between Buddhism and Christianity, it is most certainly to be found between the works of the Holy Spirit and the work of mindfulness. Mm-hmm. You know, mindfulness, the work of the Holy Spirit is to bring us to a sense of corrective thought, which would thereby usher in corrective reasoning, corrective viewpoint. And it takes slowing down so that we can get there faster in order to do that. So my practice of Jhana Marga, each and every day, I'm usually quiet for about 22 to 23 hours a day, still to this day. So this hour that we're spending together is largely fed by the silence of my mouth and my open mind to experience all things. And I think that is where they both merge. You know, Jesus said, blessed are the meek, you know, for they shall inherit the earth. Well, it's usually the people who don't get into the fight that are left to pick up all of the goodies of everybody else who's been shot on the battlefield. You can pick up the wallets, you can pick up the cell phones, you can pick up, you know, those are the people who have a furtherance. But those who have defined themselves are usually the ones who go to battle and in themselves. So Jesus and the Buddha, Jesus and Shiva, Jesus and Vishnu, you know, all, you know, are getting to the same thing. You know, this idea of destroying the illusion. What is the illusion? The illusion is whatever you define, because that thing will change. And intellectual dissection comes from being still to see the full evolution of whatever it is that is evolving, and all is evolving before us. And so, yeah, that's where the warrior, the warrior part of me, being a martial artist, I integrated, you know, my mastery of the sword, my mastery of using my hands, my mastery of balance. I use that also, the same dedication, the same prowess, the same conviction to allow my mind to be as precise in the awareness as I can possibly be. And this is, I think this is what Jesus was getting at. Imagine if Christians today had such a surgically precise awareness to see that compassion was much more needed for the woman at the well, the woman who was caught in adultery, the man who hung on the cross next to Jesus. Imagine if society today truly had that conviction that compassion is what breeds the furtherance. When you have compassion, what you do is you let everybody off the hook, including yourself. You don't have to hold to the ideals of, crucifixion or judgment. Neither does the person have to remain in a place psychologically to be kind of strapped down there. They don't, so it's good for us to exercise the greatest gift that we have, and that is our minds. So I think that's what Jesus was really getting at. If you change the mind, you can change the behavior. There's a song when I was a child made by the group Funkadelic, I believe it was, and the song was entitled "Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow." and this very crudely, this is so very true of us today. So many people are rediscovering that they gave up so much to the church that they have nothing. They've lost their mind, they've lost their peace, they've lost their money, they lost their tools and their materials to construct themselves in such a wonderful way. They've created of their lives this debauchery that they're now seeking to deconstruct. Largely because, being a Christian, being a religious person, whether it's Islam or whatever, is largely about following and not being in the precise practice of knowing for yourself, you see.
Yeah, I think, you it's so interesting because you had people who, and I'm sure you saw this, who hovered around church, but didn't really take it that seriously.
Right. Very much so.
But then you had other people who took it so seriously that you thought they got a little mentally ill with it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think the mental illness is on both sides. To be there and not take it seriously. What else could you be doing with your time? And then to take it so seriously and still be angry at everybody else is not beneficial. Also.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much. How if people want to connect with you, how do they do that? Where would you want to lead people if they want to?
Sure. You can, the name is such an odd one, and it's one that's been recognized. People can find me, you just Google me. You can find me on Facebook, Heiwa no Bushi. You can find me on Twitter, at Bushi's Peace. And then, you can email bodhicristo@gmail.com or visit the website, which will share all of that information at bodhicristo.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you do little seminars or things online ever, things that people jump in online with?
Yeah, I do. I'm a reclusive practitioner. But I do from time to time come out and I do workshops, and those are usually posted or shared through social media.
Okay.
And so people can find out whatever I'm doing on any one of those portals.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if people live near you, when the Thomasville Buddhist Center, does that have a physical presence?
Yes. It's a 7,208 square foot facility, and we hold meditation practices there. Usually on Sundays. We haven't really structured ourselves back to having in-person visitation since COVID, and we're the neighboring county to us right now, which is Randolph County, is experiencing an uptick And so we have once again resigned our physical services to online services. And, so people can find us when we have our Zoom meetings. And again, being a reclusive practitioner, I encourage people to practice more than actual follow. So when I do emerge to say, all right, we're going to get together, this is how we'll do it. It's usually in the form of a physical retreat at one of the neighboring host sites that host us. And they're usually taking place outside around a huge lake. And, people can camp out there and wake up the next morning and have coffee. And then we go into some sort of practice. So,
okay. Very good. So Heiwa no Bushi. Did I say it right?
You said it correctly. Yeah.
Okay. That's HEIWA, and then BUSHI. So, and then the Buddha Cristo.
Bodhi Cristo.
Bodhi Cristo. BODHI.
BODHICHRISTO. And Bodhi Cristo.
.com.
Yeah. And Bodhi Cristo translates the enlightened Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, my friend.
Journey that you have been on and that you're going. And I'm so glad our paths crossed there at that Wild Goose Festival. So
I knew you were a cool guy when I met you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. We'll see you next time.
All right.
This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.